So I'm going to talk to you today about this amazing phenomenon, which is just how quickly social media, technology, and everything are changing and exploding, and how fast the rate of change is. We live in this sort of interesting world. We call it the reverse pyramid of knowledge. And the problem is that today, the people on top, the C-level executives, know virtually nothing about technology and very, very little about social media. The managers are sort of afraid of it, like, what is this stuff? The staff pretty much ignores it, and then the folks, the actual worker bees, use it, but they use it personally. They don't really use it to advance the interests of the business. And frankly, any business that isn't engaged in mobile and in social media and all of these new technologies won't be a business for very long. So we aspire to sort of a different thing. We want even the C-level people who think, that they're above all this to be aware of this stuff. We want the managers to be fluent in it, the workforce to actually be sort of competent and engaged, because if you don't use this, I'll give you a perfectly good example. Harley Davidson is not a super technology company, although their bikes are unbelievably technological. They've started to do these rides, and they just did their first ride last June, and they casually, invited some people to come and do this motocross ride. To give you some idea, 160 riders showed up, but 2,000 people showed up to watch. And they were smart enough to interview these people, and not one learned about it in the press, and none of them learned about it in terms of any other communication other than social media. And this is a sort of a recurring situation that goes on all the time. So the good news, though, about this change is that it's so fast that whatever we were worried about not knowing today, we really don't have to worry that much about it, because tomorrow there'll be a whole other set of things to worry about, and they'll be different, and that's good. We talk about viral and the growth of things and hoping that a successful product or something will be viral. That used to mean basically how quickly do people start talking about your product or service, and how many people do they talk about it with and influence. And we also understood the curve of virality to basically sort of flatten out after a certain point in time. What's changed that's really remarkable, and that used to be called sort of the safe zone, what's changed today is the kids, and that means anybody under about 35, they pick these things up in about 2 seconds, but they drop them in about 1 second. So the rate of adoption is very substantial, but if you don't hit it, if you don't really capture and engage people, they drop these things almost instantly. And so it's a constant phenomena of new applications, new things. When you look at your phone, which by the way you do about 150 times a day on average, when you look at your phone, you realize how scarce a piece of real estate that is. And so the most successful businesses over the next 17 years will be the people who figure out how to be a persistent presence on your phone. But it's a moving target, and we like to say that whatever worked yesterday is going to be different tomorrow. That's just that's the game we're in. To give you an idea, today, even Facebook, which is sort of the state of the art, in the middle school zone, and some of you I'm sure have kids in middle school, Tumblr is now more popular than Facebook. By the time they get back to high school, or they get into high school, they're back on Facebook. So it's a constant moving thing. You know for sure that if you just stand still as a business, that somebody is going to outcompete you, out-iterate you, do it faster, do it cheaper, whatever it is. So it's a very, very competitive time these days. Let me take a minute to step back and talk about how we got here. Some of you are old enough to remember a part of this, but it's astonishing how few of us really sat down and thought through this. So not so many years ago, there was this thing called the personal computer. And the personal computer was the first tool that permitted us to do something really remarkable. It permitted us to create individual, personal content, digital content, by ourselves. We didn't have to have intermediaries, we didn't have to have third parties, and that was huge, and that was the first predicate of this revolution that we are all living in now. Number two was the internet. okay? We take it as a given, but before the internet, it was almost impossible to move this newly created content around. So the internet enabled us to do the second thing, which is to send the content that we had created. Collaborative tools permitted us to share it and to work on things together, with people all across the world. The global economy is very, very real. And then the question emerged that, all right, so how do you find it? And that's really what Google did. And again, these things that we take as verbs and we take for granted, not so many years ago, were non-existent. Okay? Now that's the platform. Here's what's going on today. 4 new things are happening, and each of these will have at least as material an impact as the ones we just talked about. First, hyper-personalization, the fact that we know more about you demographically and in every other respect that you can imagine, and it's totally frightening. And that's not even sort of where we're headed, because hyper-personalization combined with high-velocity computing, combined with the fact that we are all tethered, we're all walking around connected now with these devices, every single one of us, and then the merger of social media and mobility, which we call motional, or if you add location, which is a whole other dimension to this, we call it slow-mo. But the idea is that today, I can tell you that we're at about 54% now. We just tipped the balance. 54% of all online is now mobile, okay? Not so many months ago, the desktop was still the prominent way that we accessed online content. It's now moved. If your business doesn't have a mobile presence, you'll be out of business shortly. And that's the nature of the game. Now, what's astonishing is this idea of how quickly things change. All this demographic information was important, but it's too late. And so what we're interested in going forward is, what are you interested in? We want to know so we can get ahead of you. This is the famous Wayne Gretzky quote about skating not after the puck, but to where the puck is going to be. We have, by virtue of the speed of these computers, the ability to change stuff right before your eyes. And you'll see some examples of how this works. And again, it's just completely amazing that websites can adapt and change based on milliseconds of time in order to conform to what we're interested in, so that they become hyper-responsive to us. Every single device, everything we look at, everything we use in the Internet of Things will be connected going forward. Not only will your toaster talk to your alarm clock, but God knows what other devices will do strange things in your home going forward. And then lastly, this idea of mobility is combined with something we call smart reach. If you present me with anything at the right time, I'm very interested, because we have a lot of time for stuff that we're interested in. But if you hit me at the wrong time, if you provide inappropriate information or things that aren't useful to me at that instant, then it doesn't matter what the content is. And we say, as a result, that the context in which information, offers, and opportunities are delivered is more important than the content itself. And then lastly, I want to talk just for a couple of minutes about what's happening with work. And this is what I'm most excited about. We call this wiki work. But what it means basically is there is no workplace anymore. There is no single place that work will be performed. And that's super exciting, because just as Wikipedia brings together 70,000 people to be the editors, there's only about 52 employees for a company that has 460 million visitors every month. But just as they do that, we're going to have a vision of work that's going to be a real-time thing, not a real place thing. It just won't matter. And what's so exciting is the thought that we can have stay-at-home moms and retirees and people that are constrained in a variety of ways by limitations on location or travel or things like that. They can all rejoin the workforce by virtue of mobility and connectivity. We can take wasted time. I've become remarkably patient with my BlackBerry. I wait in lines that I would never have waited in before, because I feel like I'm multitasking, right? So, we can thank technology for that. But, those of us who don't suffer from hurried disease, it actually doesn't really matter, because we all have these scraps of time. We all have these things that we could be more productive with. And you'll see the ability to have a business that has all PhDs, but they happen to be all stay-at-home moms. fabulous. I mean, you couldn't hire them if your life depended on it. Otherwise, that's where we're headed, and that's what's really exciting. So, I mentioned interest. So to start with the idea of the interest graph, what we're interested in, we have all the time in the world for. Everything else doesn't really matter. This is what Google collects every time you do a search, 57 different attributes about you. As we go forward, every business is going to be a data business. Every business is going to be dependent on information in order to be competitive and to be responsive to the interest of your customers and to grow and deepen your connection with your customers. This is what Facebook knew about us in 2005. This is 2010. This is today. And it just gets worse. It just continues, and we're willing conspirators. And I'll tell you why in a minute. But the idea that you can no longer be a cat or a dog on the web, very significant, all due to Facebook. Facebook really is that watershed event where they said you gotta be who you are. And never before on the internet, never before in business was that a requirement. Before, the web was about connectivity and links, but it was based on anonymity, and now it's based on personal information. This changes every game, particularly marketing, but it's going to change healthcare, it's going to change finance, it's going to change every industry. It's just a matter of time. You may have heard this story. This is the father that called up and chewed out Target because they were sending all these maternity pitches to his daughter, and they said politely, maybe you should ask your daughter. It turned out she was pregnant. Target knew it. He didn't know it, but Target knew it. And that's just the beginning of how this personal data is being used. Here's an even worse example. The credit card companies now have a frightening ability to predict divorces. Okay? How? 4 basic criteria. Number 1, same city hotel charges. Number 2, flowers sent to a non-home address. Number 3, self-improvement expenditures. And number 4, pretty obvious, singles bars. Okay, why do they do this? Because it turns out that you're a horrible risk for paying your credit cards if you're about to get divorced. Those were all your spouse's charges, as you probably all know, right? So they're engaged in this predictive stuff. It's too late after the fact, so they're getting ahead of the game in a variety of ways. Google is also a master of this. Google now, using the ability to see who are searching real estate-centric terms, can do a better job of predicting the movement of the real estate market than the National Board of Realtors, with huge increased accuracy based on the aggregation of data, based on all of this information. And also based on the fact that they can localize it and they can time-base it and things like that. So Chango is an interesting site. It's a site that says it's too late to map what you've looked for, because in this competitive game of milliseconds, I need to get ahead of the game. And so search results are too old. Chango is a site that says, here's what that person is looking for. Now, if we can get them married up with what they're looking for, we have a very successful kind of business. And that's what's at work now. We call this the movement from analytics and diagnostics to prognostication and sort of future planning. And that's all data-driven as well. Facebook continues to sort of lead the league. They continue to create these new verbs and new tools and things. The most powerful one now is the want button. There's about 7 or 8 major retailers. They've had astonishing success with the want button, of people telling them specifically what they want to purchase. This is so powerful now. L'Oreal has moved 400 employees worldwide into just social media. And here's why. Because if you're not engaged, that vacuum is filled by your competitors. If you're not engaged, it's filled by people saying bad things about you, or animal testing advocates, or whatever it is. So you need to be in the space, whether it's a conversation you want to be a participant in, it's going on, and if you ignore it, you can be sure that someone else will take advantage of that opportunity. So to give you an idea of the ubiquity of Facebook, virtually every significant application that's out there now, 8 out of the top 10 run through Facebook, 50% of the top 400 run through Facebook, all using essentially Facebook technology to connect to their users. You all have seen the little blue box that says, do you want to write down all that garbage again, or do you want to just click here? We're all lazy, right? So we all click on that little box. So as we go forward to sort of understand this world, think of Google as a very clever, large organization with a bunch of engineers who built all these algorithms saying they were looking for this, and so now I'm going to assume they're interested in that. Now, as a grandfather, if you buy your grandchild a American Doll, you're fucked for a long, long time in terms of what comes in your email after that. But putting that aside, I mean, here's a much better flash. So Facebook is like, well, we don't have to guess. People raise their hands and ask us and tell us what they want. They tell us all this information. So how much easier is that? It's so easy that we think of Google as sort of a rear view mirror, and we think of Facebook as a sniper scope. It's that degree of precision. 40% of all display advertising now moving to Facebook. It's really the only game in town. Again, you need to have a Facebook presence probably more than you need to have a website today in terms of where people are. And here's another sea change. Here's a very significant thing. For the longest time, we knew that advertising drove commerce, but there's a great guy named John Wanamaker, and he's the author of the quote that said, half of my advertising is wasted, I just don't know which half it is, right? So today, that game has changed too in a very, very interesting way. So in the old days, like last week, we thought that you could use all of these social sites as proxies. If you were on Facebook, if you were on Yahoo, a lot of folks that would be interested in your products and services would be there, and maybe that was right, okay? But today, we have a different and much more powerful set of technologies. The payment guys, okay, the guys who actually process commerce can now connect with this personal information so they can close the loop, okay? So we can now tell whether the advertising works, and once you can tell whether it works, you double down. You don't waste any money on sort of vague hints. You don't waste any money on things that seem to make sense because it's all concrete. To give you some idea, today Amazon, more than 30% of their sales come from that really handy-dandy recommender engine. It's like, you like this, here's 5 other things we think you would like, okay? And more people today are going to Amazon for sales search than are going to Google. This is how powerful that personalization has become. But again, it's sort of like, you know, the moving finger writes and then moves on. So here's the new game in town. Apple, okay, Apple may think that it's great to have 5 Cs of all kinds of colors. And to me, that's just an indication that they've completely lost their way. But you might like pink. I know that the mayor likes pink, or purple, or whatever it is. Anyway, here's what Apple is doing now. They have 600 million people's credit cards on the iTunes store. You all probably have experienced that. They're going to announce shortly a payment service. It's going to be the definitive payment service. It'll be how we pay. We won't have to worry about the Google Wallet and 12 other things because they've completely mastered this. They've already got your credit information. And they make it so painless and so easy that this is how the world progresses in terms of that. So that's coming. Now, you know, every business analyzes sales information, but again, I want to just sort of give you an idea. This is a typical 2-month slice of how a business might describe their sales activity. But when we lay against this personal data, we see an amazing thing. It's not a fairly steady situation with respect to sales. It's completely driven by promotions. Completely driven by promotions. So if you're not going to promote, you might as well forget it. And the people who are promoting are the ones that are driving the sales. When we start to do this, the power of this kind of information becomes clear. Here's Ticketmaster, but here's Ticketmaster enabled by Facebook, okay? What's the difference? I can tell where my friends are sitting. I can tell who's attending. I don't have to tell my parents, by the way. I can keep it just between my friends. But the point is that this is changing behavior in an astonishing amount of ways. And this is something that Ticketmaster couldn't do for their own customers. They couldn't do it because they didn't know who your friends are. They didn't have any of this personal information. So that's how we're moving forward. We did the artwork for Tyra Banks's new book. Sounds like an oxymoron, but what can I say? And in connection with that, Tyra has 3.3 million Twitter followers. So we sent a personalized video to each and every one of these followers. First week out, #1 on Barnes & Noble, #2 on Amazon across the world. This book, which is virtually unreadable, and part of a trilogy. So if you're not afraid, you should be very afraid. All right, anyway, in the context of politics, it's even more interesting. We can now deliver a message to each person personalized. And that's really significant because that means we avoid the media. That means we tell you personally what you want to hear. And that's a big, big difference, okay? We call that whispering. And so in the last 2 or 3 weeks of the campaign, we launched more than 5 million of these individual communications to people that other people who had not yet voted were good friends with, active good friends, who were women, who were moms, who were located in certain geographies, okay? And in that movement system, we know that we drove about 780,000 people to the polls. And we rewarded them with, you know, Facebook badges and Foursquare things and stuff like that. What's 80%? 80% is the likelihood that Facebook can now determine which 2 people, remember there's 170 million people in the United States on Facebook, 1 billion in the world, which 2 people are going to change their status to dating, and not just dating at random, but dating each other, okay? And this is what they admit they know, right? And that they can do. So who knows what evil is lurking in the hearts of these people. In Brazil, more than 80% of the people learned about the revolutionary activity and all the stuff going on in Brazil through social media. Brazil is the #2 country, 60 million people on Facebook in Brazil, in the world. Very, very interesting. So why do we do this? Why do we share all this personal information? And believe me, it's not just the kids, it's all of us. It's because we're lazy in a way, because we like to make a deal, all right? We like to be where our friends are, we like to save time, we don't want to do redundant things. And all of this is of a piece. We just want things to make us more productive, save us money, save us time, all of this stuff. But it's really about something that's much more significant for businesses, okay? It's about the dollars and cents. Because these new tools permit you to do something which is the lifeblood of business, and that is not new customer acquisition. It's deepening the spend and increasing the connection, as any city administration will tell you too. It's how do I connect more deeply and provide more services and more help to my customers, because as you do, the reward chart is clear. You win in a zillion different additional ways. It's not just more sales, it's better sales, it's less maintenance, it's higher profits, all of that stuff. So the move we're seeing is from a world where everybody was frenzied about new customer acquisition to the back end of the funnel, to services like Belly, that are basically trying to say, how do I connect customers and get them to come back and hook them and connect them? That's very, very significant because it's ridiculously expensive and very noisy and very congested to be out there in the world of new customers. But to get your existing customers to spend more turns out to be not so hard. And now, one of my friends is here who's a banker, and I'll just tell you a great bank story. So we were hired by a bank to deal with the attrition issue. 4% of their customers leave every year. And they spend a lot of money worrying about attrition. And we said, well, here's a flash. 2% died, okay? So they're not probably a good bet, okay? 1% moved out of the country, and the others, you know, sort of outgrew your marketplace, whatever it is, all right? Instead of really pissing away money worrying about those things that are fundamentally unchangeable and you couldn't improve, slide up the scale and figure out, how do I get these people that we haven't touched more than once a year, how do I engage them more? What other services can I do? What other things can I provide to them to make them more likely to come to me for their new mortgage, or more likely to connect with me in these kinds of services? And that's, again, where you want to end up. You want to understand the lifetime value of customers, and that's what's really worth investing in, and that's where all the money is. But this idea of surveillance continues. You know, you've probably seen Flow on TV. If you put this thing in from Progressive or from Allstate now or from State Farm, this little dongle, which 19 out of the 20 top auto insurers now say, run it for 30 days and maybe we'll save you 30% on your insurance. What are we doing? We're saying, I'll share this surveillance information, I'll share my driving habits, and maybe you'll give me a break on my insurance. And that's a pretty good deal if you're a good driver, okay? And so that kind of stuff is part one. That's this issue of all of this amazing interest in personal data. Part two is, what do we do with it in real time? And that's where we're headed. That's this idea of the ability to leverage things that haven't happened yet, to really predict the future and to react to it. So you may know this story, Orbitz. When you go into Orbitz and look for hotels, okay, if you come in on a Mac, they send you more expensive hotels, okay? If you come in on a PC, you're a slug, right? Only the creative, affluent people use Macs, and therefore, that's how they've done this. And that's sort of brute force, okay? It's getting much more personal. This is a Safeway site for online shopping with individual pricing on the fly. Now, do you think they give me the discounted price on Charmin? Okay, no, I love Charmin, okay? They give it to the Kleenex guy to try and get him to convert to Charmin, and he should. It's soft, it's really, anyway. But they do that in real time. I mean, so there are companies now that in the 30 milliseconds that it takes to load a web page can personalize that web page for you and make offers and provide information personal to you, and that's just the beginning. Everybody knows about Twitter. What people don't really appreciate is it's not trivial, it's not stupid, it's become fundamentally the primary channel for current news and information in this country, and it's used by everybody. It's used by your employees, your constituents, your vendors, your partners, your competitors, and you need to have and understand the tools that are available to understand the Twitterverse. Everything now is not broadcast. It's not sort of a one-way thing. It's really bilateral conversations. And so I recommend this site only if you have no life. Okay, it's called twiststory.com. And you put in a word like hate or love or something like that, and then it begins, it's really hard to see, but it begins feeding you every tweet in the world, 65 billion tweets a day, that uses that word. Now, that's not really the magic, although it's unbelievably compelling, and that's why I say don't do it if you have a life. But think about it if it was your name, or your product's name, or something that you were tracking, and understand that we have these tools that permit us to do an astonishing number of things. We can tell who likes us, who doesn't like us, and who's undecided in any context of social conversation now. And this is, you know, a trick of old baseball managers. I think Casey Stengel said the trick to be a great baseball manager is to keep the people who hate your guts away from the ones who are undecided, right? So we can tell now who likes us, who doesn't, okay? Who are the big talkers? What are the channels that they're using? And why would you spend a dime elsewhere? Why wouldn't you focus on the influencers, on the channels, on all of this stuff? And that's just the beginning. We did a project for Verizon and for AT&T. This was really interesting. This was when Verizon was announced as the second vendor for the iPhone, and AT&T was scared that a lot of people were going to leave, with good reason. You know, everybody should leave AT&T, but we were able to parse that audience, millions of people who were engaged in this very conversation about this very issue, and say these people are staying, these people are going, and these people are on the fence. Now, do you spend a third of your marketing spend against each third of that population? No way. You go for the people who are on the fence, and that's how you can be so much smarter and more directed about your spend in so many other, you know, really powerful ways. This is sort of the history of bad things. This is breakup language, about 250,000 tweets that use breakup language. It tells you a lot about the country. If you forget Valentine's Day, you're probably screwed. Nobody wants to be alone on Christmas. You don't take your ex-boyfriend or girlfriend home for spring break or for the winter holidays. And Mondays are fairly safe days to have, social and romantic conversations. So, this is just beginning, but this is how we can measure the mood of the country. This is how we can take these huge aggregations of data and slice and dice them in really amazing ways. A lot of research on movies. We can tell now on Wednesday night how a movie's going to do. We don't need Roger Ebert, may he rest in peace. And that's just the beginning. We're actually going to see now that the theaters are going to take 2 steps back. Certainly for premieres, we know this already, that they're encouraging people to create affirmative word of mouth right while these movies are running. So there's going to be actual zones within the theater. Now, the good news about this audience is some of you are close to my age, so I'm going to show you the most powerful piece of new technology that's come out for quite a while. It's called runpee.com, and it tells you when you can go pee during the movie, okay? It tells you this is sort of a boring love scene, you won't miss much, here's what's going to happen in the next 2 minutes, get your watch. And so it's a very powerful thing that is mobile enabled, obviously, very critical technology. Anyway, so look, we think of this as a world where we have to engage in new ways with customers, and it's totally what's going on. And what's going to do it? All this mobile stuff, all these devices, all this idea that we're constantly computing and we're constantly connected. And that's what's really exciting. I mentioned this before, that we've migrated now to mobile as the primary way that online commerce is happening. But think about shopping at the L station for your groceries or at the bus stop. Think about a button on your refrigerator that delivers your favorite pizza just by clicking on it 30 minutes later. We're able to project things into parks now, into baseball and football stadiums that are geo-fenced so that those offers only exist in space, in time, within those areas. In the malls, we can actually project competitive information to people walking through the malls, all of that, because these devices are so smart. The new Samsung phone knows when you're looking at it and turns off the screen to save the battery when you're not looking at it, okay? There are new devices that permit us to look at ads on our lock screen. This is something you throw into the laundry, and when the thing stops spinning, it calls your phone and says, the load is dry, okay? It measures rotation and temperature and moisture. Electronic leashes tell you when you walked away from your keys. This is stuff you can stick on anything so you can find it with your phone. This tracks your luggage. And again, one of my favorite, we've all moved. Has anybody not moved in here? Okay. So you give your precious belongings to a bunch of toothless people, and you hope that they'll appear at the other end. This is a fake little box that you put in with your load. And then as the load is making its way across the country, it sends you GPS updates, okay? So you know where it is, and you know that they took 2 days off and went to some music festival or something. Anyway, so what is Smart Reach? Smart Reach is this whole idea of giving me the information I need, when I need it, where I need it, without asking for it. And that's where we're headed. We can think of this as the absence and the disappearance of forgetting, because we've got it all in these devices. This is another one of my favorite things, talk about location-based things. So what does this do? Well, if you're in a bar and you got the wrong end of an argument, this creates a fake Wikipedia page that supports your part of the story, okay? So it's called Citation Needed, and it's like, look, here, it's right in Wikipedia. I guarantee you that I'm right. So very powerful things. But, we have technology that tells us where our friends are, what buildings are, the history of buildings, who's attending conferences, what's going on in locations, all of these kinds of things, because these devices are actually smarter than desktop computers. And so we're able to, we're calling phones trackers now, because the central function of GPS is much more than just making calls. This is a vision of Prague. So we married cell data with census data in Prague, and this lets us look at the city in the morning and see the distribution of people in the evening, and then we can look at just the tourists. So you're going to see this kind of technology measuring crowds going forward, measuring traffic patterns going forward, all these kinds of things. And in the stores, we're able to do an even more amazing thing now. We're able to actually look at the traffic patterns in the stores based on your phone moving around. So we can see what display has a tremendous amount of dwell time. That means it's very compelling. We can see how many people went directly from the display to the register, how many people came in and left the store. All of this stuff is because we're all tethered and we're all measurable in amazing ways. This is Jamba Juice, you probably know about that, but they measure their entire universe in 15-minute increments. They know which employees are the best possible salespeople. They give those people first shot at overtime. Why? Because they're the most productive, okay? And that's how workforces are going to be measured now in these kinds of productivity increments. It's really amazing. If you've gone to a variety of stores, I'm sure in Highland Park you've seen these dispensers. We think that they're helping us. We're really helping them. This is an astonishing field research device. It's helping Coke determine what flavors by geography are most popular, how people create their own drinks, what new drinks should be created. And to give you some idea of what's exciting about innovation these days is this thing, these Coke machines used to have 25-gallon bags of stuff, and now they have little cartridges, and it came from cancer research, where they use those micro cartridges for controlled dosages. Now that Coke machine has a universe of these cartridges, and it's about 100 times more efficient, a tenth of the cost. There's no giant schlepping of this stuff, and it's just the beginning of where all of these crossover technologies are also going to change the things that we use in our everyday life. Video is exploding. Everything is video now. We watch more and more video, but here's the deal. Kids, sort of the canary in the cave, the leading indicator, 2.5 times more video online and about 11 more hours less traditional TV now. So as the kids go, so goes the world eventually. Mobile is their first screen. It's really their first screen now. And we don't even use the word television anymore because it's video, and it's video through every channel, on every screen, in every fashion. We did some work with these people, the Vine people. You're seeing all kinds of new little tools that permit us to capture very short bursts of 15-second video and things like that. This is how kids are sharing a lot of information using these kinds of sites. Some of them can be curated, some of them can't. It's an interesting set of control issues. And this is a whole nother business, okay? This is the advent of stay-at-home businesses that are really astonishing, okay? And it's all part of a new noun called camming, okay? And basically camming is people who are sitting in their bedroom and they have 3 million subscribers for $5 each. This is the lady on the right, you're right. And she shows you a new design for your nails, and you subscribe to that for $5 a month, and she has 3 million subscribers, okay? This is operating in her bedroom, and this is just the beginning of how people with skill sets don't need physical locations, they don't need stores, they don't need anything to reach a worldwide, very exciting, marketplace. All through basically enabled video, which, by the way, is distributed virtually for free. Virtually for free. Okay, so again, that idea of those platforms way back when we used to have to pay for all of these things. The world has gone from something that depended on capital, the acquisition of resources, to something that is totally driven by attention. And if you can break through, you can be successful. It doesn't matter that you have a huge amount of resources, you don't need it anymore, very frankly. Here's another important site for sort of cathartic relief. You can just dial up somebody and you can yell at them about whatever issue you care to yell at them about. And they'll take it because they hope to yell at somebody soon as well. All right, and lastly, I mentioned this thing about the work world, the porous workplace, everything being focused on real time, what can you do in the moment, not where are you? And so the idea of recapturing all these scraps of times, millions of students and stay-at-home moms and retirees and things like that, all these services, it's so exciting to think about bringing them back into the workforce. And we're seeing that there are a lot of economic consequences to this kind of connectivity as well. Just to give you an idea of one of these, so for 10 years, the AIDS research guys couldn't figure out how certain AIDS-dependent proteins folded back on each other. They put it out to 200,000 gamers, 16-year-old to 25-year-old kids, and they solved it in 2 weeks. Because it was just a puzzle. They didn't know from AIDS, they just knew that it was a puzzle, and how do you get these proteins to combine in a certain fashion. So that's the power, the good power of the crowd. There's, there's other powers of the crowd as well. But here's where we're headed. We're headed to a world where many, many of us, more than 40% in a very few years, will be working for ourselves. That's either really great news or, it's really frightening news. But it's happening. We're seeing people that are building systems to match freelancers in all kinds of different environments. And here's the great thing, this is just a tip if you are a freelancer. So it turns out that 2 out of 3 wins, okay? So you can do great work, you can be a great person, or you can deliver on time. It doesn't take all 3, this is what I've discovered. So you can be a complete asshole if you do great work and you deliver on time, okay? If you're a really good, person, you can get away with being late on a given project. And you don't even have to be the best if you're just a really nice person and get the stuff done on time. So the freelance economy is coming. We've got translators, we've got task rabbits, and look at the makeup of these folks, okay? They're young professionals, they're college students, they're retirees, they're stay-at-home moms. They're making a living in new ways, okay? And you can recruit people to do virtually anything anywhere in the world. Chores, logo designs, analysis by name brand scientists, consultations about your business by the minute with really national and world-class experts, all kinds of different things, all available and enabled at micro prices, because everything is by the byte on the web. Everything is, it's not bulk, it's not expensive, it's not, you have to make long-term commitments. You can get it, and you can get it in instants. And lastly, the final sort of tool for the younger folks in this crowd. So everybody knows this scene. This is from Top Gun. You've lost that loving feeling. So it turns out, this is most popular when I do this speech for large groups of technology nerds, that there's a service called Wing Woman, and here's what it does. It gets a nice-looking woman to go to the bar with you, and all the other women assume that if she's with that nerd, he must not be that bad. So it's another new service. I think it's $7 an hour. But anyway, that's my story. Thank you very much. Okay, anybody? Yes?
So, my son is involved with a business where people want to sign up for the product like a day before they're going to use it.
Right.
But then they don't have the product available because it's not like it's always the same demand. Sometimes it's less, sometimes it's more, and we're trying to deal with that. Do you have any?
Not knowing the product. I mean, if it's, I don't know. I don't know how to answer.
You said it, you're like, you have to be before the.
Well, look. I mean, 100 years ago, sales organizations, created a book called Beat Yesterday, and it was, you tracked demand. Historically, and that's still a really good way to do this stuff.
So what they would like is for the people to decide sooner rather than when they're deciding.
Well, then the way you do that is you give them a price incentive to do it sooner. That's how the world works. I mean, there are all kinds of trade-offs. If you think about time and the value of information, just to give you an idea. So for a real-time stock trader, he needs instant information. For a layperson who watches their stock portfolio maybe once a day is okay. For somebody who's writing about the history of the stock market, it doesn't matter. It can be in the library. So, and those increments have higher values to different people. So some people who want it at the last minute, they should pay a premium. People who schedule it so that you can better control demand, they should get it for less. It's one strategy. Yeah. Yes, ma'am?
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
Great.
Thanks.
Great presentation. Thank you. My head is spinning. I'm sure almost everybody in the room.
That's the goal.
So I just learned about something called social intelligence. I was researching something last night where in a disaster like Japan or Haiti, people who tweet are found because where they are
Sure.
able to. So can you speak to that?
Well, this happened, the most interesting place that this happened was Haiti, and here's what happened. There was a lot of tweeting going on, but it was all in Haitian, which nobody could friggin' understand. So they took all those tweets and they pushed it out to the whole rest of the world and found speakers who translated it into English for the crews, which were all American English-speaking crews. So that's how that was done. But Twitter is very effective in sub-Saharan areas, in Africa for tracking flu, for tracking viruses, for all kinds of on-the-fly reporting. So a lot of that is happening in a lot of different ways. Yes, ma'am.
The parent of somebody who's going out in the world, do you see like the bottom part of it? Is this more from an engineering? Is this more from marketing? Is this more from business? What's the background of these people who are on the cutting edge?
You know, I think that the background is passion. I think, you know, you gotta care about this stuff. I always say that you won't be successful in social media. You can't let it take over your business or your life, but you won't be successful if you don't enjoy it, if you don't have people who are the right age who, you know, enjoy that. So it doesn't matter. I mean, there are people that are going back to school, there are people that are leaving school, there are people that are trying to learn it on their own. It's a little bit of everything. It's some technology, it's some marketing, but the truth is, these social platforms keep getting more and more accessible where you don't have to know anything. You know, you could go to Blogger and you could be a publisher in 2 seconds, you know, worldwide, whatever you want to say to whoever you want to say it to. They'll even pay you for the privilege of your writings and stuff. And that doesn't take any technology, it just takes an interest and the ability to find an audience. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned video is huge, YouTube
Uh-huh.
comes to mind. If you were producing a video, do you know the average length that someone will watch a video?
A minute and a half
Okay.
is the longest, mostly under a minute. But, you know, think about Christmas morning, okay? We will never again be reading some pidgin English instruction manual, right? We'll go on our phone or on our iPad to a website. It'll show us a beautiful and humorous step-by-step visual thing. And that's how we'll learn everything. That's how we'll be instructed. And, you know, that'll migrate into the schools and everywhere else as well. Yes, sir. Just kick me off whenever you want.
You mentioned about the relationship where it's much cheaper to establish relationships with your customers.
To deepen.
Deepen your relationship. Being the parent of 2 teenagers, I've noticed a lot of these teenagers have very low skill sets in terms of communicating in person and maintaining eye contact and things of that nature. How do you anticipate this technology where you're living in front of a screen can impact those people that have to actually establish relationships?
Well, I don't think, I'm not optimistic, but I mean, I'll tell you that, you know, we're gonna see a classroom now that's gonna have 25 kids that are each gonna be in front of a device. It'll probably be a tablet more than a desktop, and every single one of them will be learning at their own pace. Some will be remedial, some will be extra credit, some will be on par. But we're just beginning to understand this. Eddie Glassman, who's in the back, you know, attends meetings with me, and I actually wrote a column about this. He takes notes on his phone or on his tablet. Okay, now, if any of us in the room were in a meeting and somebody had a foolscap, you know, a legal pad and was, we say that's the most diligent person in the world. We see somebody doing the same thing on a phone or a tablet, it's like, that asshole is checking email, right? So we actually ask people to say, our young people, that that's how they capture information, so that people in the meeting aren't, you know, so a huge set of differences. Kids don't understand privacy, they don't understand a lot of these things. And, you know, we have a technology school. 25% of the curriculum is people skills, because talent and technology is probably number 5 or 6. It's like, are they assholes? Are they good collaborators, team players, excited? You know, do they show up on time? By the time you get to the technology, it's okay, but it's going to change tomorrow anyway, so who cares? All right, listen, thank you very much.